I was standing in front of the three-paneled mirror inside Suite 917 at the Carlton Regency Hotel in downtown Los Angeles, holding back the scream I could feel crawling up my throat. My stylist, Harper, stood beside me, frantically pulling open garment bags, her red acrylic nails flying like warning flags. My best friend Tara sat on the edge of the plush velvet settee, frozen mid-sip of her overpriced green juice. Even she knew something had gone terribly wrong. My dress was gone. Gone, as in not delayed, not damaged, not stuck in traffic from the downtown fashion district, just gone. It was the night of the Zenith Awards, and I was nominated for Best Breakthrough Performance in a Streaming Series. This night was supposed to be my arrival. I'd spent the last 2 years clawing my way out of student debt and into the kind of roles that didn't require me to die in the first 10 minutes. Now, here I was, headline nominee, red carpet slot at 7:42 p.m. sharp, press interviews scheduled with Vanity Fair and Glam Weekly, and no dress. It was delivered yesterday, Harper was saying, her voice on the verge of panic. DHL confirmed it, signed for by M. Ralston. Who the hell is M. Ralston? I barked, already crossing the suite to my phone. Tara stood up. Maybe it got sent to another room. The designer said it was custom labeled. My hands were shaking. Not from nerves. No, this was something worse. Rage, humiliation, confusion. I'd designed the concept myself and worked with Leontine Armand, the Parisian couture legend. That gown was a statement, an echo of old Hollywood drama and modern feminist edge. If you ask me, it was supposed to change my entire trajectory. I dialed the number for Armand's atelier, the one I had memorized just in case, but it rang straight to voicemail. Harper was already calling the courier. Then there was a knock at the door. I practically lunged across the suite, flinging it open to reveal a petite woman with silver braids and an iPad in her hands. Ms. Renaud? Yes? Hi, I'm Amalia from Wardrobe Liaison. I'm here to pick up your garment return for Valentina Aria Renaud. My full name. On a pickup order. My heart sunk. There's no return. The dress didn't arrive, I said flatly. Amalia blinked. I have confirmation that it was collected this morning by one of your team members, signed out at 8:14 a.m. I turned to Harper. She looked like she'd been slapped. No one from my team took it, I said. We've been here since 7:30. The woman's expression changed slightly, like she was realizing the storm she'd just walked into. I'm just the messenger, ma'am, but it's in our system as picked up for pre-alteration exhibition use. I can show you. She turned the screen. Sure enough, there was my name, my suite number, and a signature that wasn't mine, or Harper's, or Tara's. I didn't even realize I had sat down until I felt the cold glass of the coffee table beneath me. Someone had intercepted my dress. Stolen it. Before I could spiral completely, my phone buzzed. A text from Dax Montclair. Dax, you okay? Thought I'd see you at rehearsal. Heard your look was next level. Wink. I stared at the screen, bile rising in my throat. Dax was the only person I didn't want to see tonight. He was also the only person who might actually have a reason to sabotage me. Because Dax wasn't just my co-star on Riverlight. He was also my ex. And most painfully, he was dating Skylar Naveen now, the rising starlet who happened to be the protege of none other than Leontine Armand. I stood up. Call the event coordinator. I need a delay on my red carpet time. 15 minutes, 20 if you can get it. Harper nodded. What are you going to do? Find out who has my dress, I said, grabbing my tote bag and slipping on my sneakers. Because here's the truth they never tell you when you make it. Hollywood is high school with better lighting, and tonight someone stole my prom dress. But they forgot one thing. I used to design them myself.
I pushed through the velvet ropes and into the chaos behind the scenes, the air thick with perfume, panic, and the hum of last-minute adjustments. The Zenith Awards ballroom was a living organism, pulsating with ambition. Stylists sprinted across the glossy marble floor, clutching steaming irons and makeshift sewing kits. Press handlers barked into headsets. Photographers lined the perimeter, already snapping models arriving in borrowed gowns. My heart thrummed in time with the frantic energy. I wasn't here to be number 4 on a best dressed list. I was here to prove a point. Skylar Naveen had her entourage in a tight circle, whispering animatedly, as if they were decoding a secret they couldn't wait to share. She stood tall, the stolen gown hugging her figure like it was made for her, long black hair cascading in soft waves. The champagne pink of the dress shimmered under the theater lights, but to me, it was as dead as yesterday's headlines. I took a steadying breath and walked over. "Skylar," I said, loud enough for her team to turn. She looked up, eyebrows arching. "Valentina, didn't expect to see you here so early." Behind me, my stylist Harper had laid out black fabric, scraps of tulle, and a sewing kit on a portable table. I'd called in a favor with one of the backstage techs, destinations be damned, we were crafting a look from scratch. "I thought I'd take care of the rest of your looks tonight, because you clearly need a designer." I tapped the hem. "And apparently you're not very good at returning things." Her team bristled. Skylar offered a cool smile. "You're being theatrical. I'm wearing an Armand, not you." "Oh, you'll be wearing me, starting with the after party." I unzipped my tote and pulled out a half-finished bodice, structured panels of black satin, edges that glittered with hand-sewn sequins. "I'm going to redesign your entire red carpet circuit tonight, from the awards to the after party, and you'll wear every piece." A stylist stepped forward, ready to intervene, but Skylar shook her head, her eyes locked on mine. "Fine," she said in a low voice, "but if I don't like what you produce, I'll make sure the world never hears your name again." "You want a war? Let's call this trench couture." I hooked a red-crimson measuring tape around my neck. "Now sit down." Over the next 90 minutes, the backstage area transformed into a battlefield runway. I drafted sketches on scrap paper, sharp shoulders, cinched waists, plunging backs. I rallied 3 tailors I'd known from theater productions, whispering instructions as they draped bolts of fabric around Skylar's frame. The stylist team that once hovered arrogantly now moved at my command. One steamed the panels, another pinned seams, a third arranged the muslin overlays. Skylar sat motionless, pale under the halogen lights. Her initial defiance was replaced by a curious stillness. I barely recognized her from the rehearsals. The stolen gown felt like a distant memory, overtaken by this living sculpture taking shape in front of me. The camera flashes outside the Zenith Ballroom were relentless, splashing against the glossy doors like lightning behind tinted glass. But inside, something electric was happening too, just not the kind of spotlight Skylar Naveen was used to. As I stepped back from the final stitch on the gown I'd designed for her, yes, her, the same woman who paraded my stolen look hours ago, I saw it. Silence. Even her entourage couldn't pretend anymore. They'd stopped murmuring, the makeup artist with the airbrush paused mid-spray, a handler set down her earpiece. All eyes were on the mirror. The gown was black, constructed from sharp panels and flowing velvet, with a corseted bodice that dipped like an hourglass into a flared fishtail skirt. At her shoulders, I'd layered structured organza into wing-like folds, not dramatic enough to be costume, but bold enough to say, "I am not yours to underestimate." Skylar turned slightly. The gown shimmered as she moved. A living sculpture. And whether she admitted it or not, she felt it. She met my eyes in the mirror. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice lower, softer now, not snide, not smug, curious. I didn't answer, because, truth be told, I wasn't sure anymore. I wasn't just an actress, not just a nominee, not just someone whose gown got hijacked. I was the one they'd go to from now on, and that terrified me. At 7:44 p.m., just 2 minutes past her original red carpet slot, Skylar descended the grand staircase toward the zenith carpet, wearing me. It was Harper who whispered the words first. "That's your dress." I stood beside the photographer's barrier, back in a sleek pantsuit I'd grabbed from my own emergency rack. No one was taking my photo, but my work? My work was blinding the cameras. The announcers, influencers, stylists all shouted her name. "Skylar, who are you wearing tonight?" I held my breath. She turned, perfect smile in place. "Custom, Valentina Renault." The clicks of shutters exploded.
The cameras didn't stop. Even as I turned away from Skylar and drifted into the heart of the Zenith afterparty, the flashbulbs kept trailing me like fireflies, persistent, hungry, electric. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't ducking from their glow. I walked straight through them, letting the light hit my cheekbones, letting the whispers trail behind me. That's Valentina Renaud. She's the one who designed the look. I thought she was just an actress. Just. Funny how quickly a word can shrink or expand. An hour ago, I was just the girl whose dress went missing, just the nominee who might not make it to the carpet, just the actress scrambling to survive her first big break. Now I was something else. The designer. The story. Val. Harper caught up with me by the champagne bar, breathless, mascara slightly smudged from our earlier meltdown in Suite 917. "You're trending on 4 continents," she gasped. Hashtag Valentina Vengeance is the top tag on Insta. People think the Gone thing was planned, like some PR masterstroke. I let out a stunned laugh. If I planned it, I wouldn't have nearly vomited in the hotel elevator. Tara joined us, holding her phone high. New York Fashion Wire wants an exclusive. So does FemMode and The Cut. Wait, seriously? You've got interview requests through next Wednesday. I blinked. The room tilted for a second, not from the champagne, but from the sheer force of whiplash. Less than 12 hours ago, I was ironing out imaginary wrinkles in a gown that never arrived. Now the fashion media was asking for my quotes. It was almost 2 in the morning when the after-party finally began to thin out. Guests filtered into limousines or clutched tired heels in one hand as they waited for their Ubers. I sat in a velvet booth near the back, shoes off, head resting against the cool wall. Harper slid in beside me. "You good?" I nodded. "I'm just absorbing." She tilted her head. "Want to see something wild?" She passed me her phone. On the screen, an email. Subject: Milan Capsule Collaboration Proposal from Persica Atelier International. I blinked. "Is this real?" Harper grinned. "They want to fly you out next week. Private fittings, early fall showcase." I covered my mouth with my hand. Persica was no joke. An Italian house known for launching bold, emergent couture talents, often giving outsiders their first real taste of global fashion. What do I say? You say yes, and then you call Leontine Armand and tell her your price just went up. Back in the suite, Tara passed out on the chaise lounge with a half-eaten fruit tart on her chest. Harper curled up by the window, still responding to DMs from stylists and PR agents. I stood barefoot in the center of the room and stared at the spot where the dress should have been that morning, where it wasn't. Funny how absence became fuel. I pulled out my sketchpad and began drawing. Not for Skylar, not for any future red carpet. For me. I sketched what I should have worn, a molten red slip drape gown with an open spine and sleeve cuffs shaped like a phoenix's tail. Not a symbol of rebirth, but of proof that you could be burned alive and still walk into the smoke. And then I wrote one word at the top of the page. House Renaud. My name. My future. The next 72 hours moved like a dream sequence. Magazine covers, podcast invites, a profile feature in Fashion and Fire. I spent the mornings sketching, the afternoons in fittings, the evenings on panels. I'd turned down 20 offers and accepted 4, including one that would make me the youngest guest designer to appear at the Venice Designer Circle. Skylar, meanwhile, was in full damage control. Her PR team spun the original dress theft into a misunderstanding. She did one apologetic Instagram story, awkward and brief, but everyone had seen the footage. She signed that dress out. She knew exactly what she was doing. The public might forget, but the industry didn't. Still, I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Every day she wore one of my gowns from the emergency collection I'd whipped together post-Zenith was another reminder that I wasn't just the girl who got wronged. I was the girl who rose. It was 2 weeks later in Milan that it finally hit me. I stood in the fitting room of Persica's flagship studio, surrounded by mirrored walls and the ghostly rustle of silk swatches. My models waited backstage, gown zipped, heel strapped. And as I peeked through the curtain at the row of editors, stylists, buyers, and critics seated across the runway, my throat tightened. Not from fear, but from awe. Because there, in the third row, was Leontine Armand. Beside her, Anna Dombries. Behind her, the executive fashion director of Fierce UK. They were all here to see me. The lights dimmed, music swelled. And then they walked. Gown after gown. Power, elegance, defiance. Everything I never got to wear. And at the end, the finale dress, molten red, phoenix sleeves. I stepped out last. Not as an actress, not as a muse, but as a designer. And the room rose to its feet.
Milan changed everything. Not just my career trajectory, but my posture, my instincts, even the way I entered rooms. I didn't walk in hoping to be seen anymore. I walked in knowing I was expected. The Persica debut had sparked something I wasn't ready for. Demand. Not interest, not buzz. Demand. I went from hand-sewing samples on hotel carpet floors to fielding inquiries from fashion houses that previously would have had me escorted out their front door. House Renaud was no longer a sketch in the margins. It was a reality. 6 weeks after the Zenith Awards, I stood inside a 2,400-square-foot showroom in London's East End, surrounded by mannequins, swatches, and a skeleton staff of 3. The walls were raw brick and the floors were cold marble, but to me, it was a cathedral. We had no sign outside yet, no receptionist, just ambition. "The wool order stuck in customs," Harper said, pacing with her phone wedged between shoulder and ear. "Our invite list is 143 and counting," Tara added, tapping her iPad. "Do we have chairs for that many?" I didn't even look up. Who sits at a standing show? Harper grinned. "Queen behavior." We were prepping for the private reveal of House Renaud's inaugural collection. The name carried weight now. Skylar had worn 6 more of my gowns since Zenith, 2 of them to premieres that she headlined, not me. But every interview she did, every mention of her style evolution included my name. There was a strange satisfaction in that. Especially because she never apologized publicly again, not properly. 2 days before the London showcase, I got the message. It came through Harper's phone, but the sender was unmistakable. Skylar Naveen would like to meet. Private. No press. Just us. I hesitated. Tara was immediately suspicious. She's going to pull some dramatic apology. Or worse, ask you to design her Met Gala look. That would be a 7-figure gig, Harper muttered, not without irony. But I wasn't thinking about money. I was thinking about closure. I texted back one word, when. We met in Hyde Park. No cameras, no entourage, just a wooden bench near the Serpentine, where joggers and old couples drifted by without noticing the two actresses, turned fashion rivals, sitting under a canopy of golden leaves. Skylar wore sunglasses, not because of the sun, but because that's who she was, always hiding. I wore none. I didn't need to hide anymore. She sat quietly for a minute before speaking. She said, "I didn't come to apologize." I nodded. "Didn't think you did." She studied me. "You were never meant to win." I raised an eyebrow. "Clearly." "But you did," she said. "And you didn't just win the award. You won the room, the press, the runway." She turned slightly. "You won the narrative." I didn't reply, not immediately. Then, "I still wear your work, so what does that make you?" She cracked a smile. "Dependent." I returned it, honest. We sat in silence again. "You're going to be a problem," she said eventually. "I intend to be," I replied. Then I stood up. "I don't need your apology, Skylar. I needed you to admit it, that you took something, and now I've taken it back." Her sunglasses slid down her nose. "Fair play," she said. And for once, I believed her. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now back to the story. The House Reno showcase wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy, but it landed. Influencers filmed the entire walk. Vogue Paris called it Parisian restraint meets London blade. And 3 days later, I was invited to co-design a capsule with Illyra, a sustainability-forward luxury brand that rarely collaborated with newcomers. But the real shock came in the form of an envelope, hand-delivered, with a wax seal, from the Met Gala board. Theme, New Blood. They wanted me to attend, not as a +1, as a designer. I sat in the back of the London showroom that night, staring at the envelope. I hadn't cried once since Zenith. But this cracked me. Because for the first time, no one was giving me a shot out of pity, pressure, or politics. They wanted me because I'd become undeniable. I called Harper. She screamed. I called Tara. She sobbed. And then I pulled out my sketchbook. Because now, it was time to dress myself.
The pencil in my hand moved like it had a will of its own. The moment the Met Gala invitation landed in my lap, my instincts kicked into overdrive. This wasn't just a runway. It wasn't just a red carpet. It was the Everest of fashion storytelling. One misstep, and I'd be an ambitious nobody who got lucky at a mid-tier award show. But if I got it right, if I nailed it, House Renaud wouldn't just be a label. It would be a legend. And I wasn't just designing for someone else this time. This one was for me. Theme, New Blood. Interpretation, rising power, evolution, legacy reborn through rebellion. I'd stared at those 3 phrases for hours, played with silhouettes in my mind, thought about literal blood, the metaphor of being cut open, the idea of showing the scars. But when it finally clicked, it wasn't with something loud or grotesque. It was with softness. Softness used as armor. A gown shaped like a second skin, delicate on the outside, brutal underneath. Sheer panels over hand-stitched corsetry, layers of organza shaped like blooming bruises, threaded ribs stitched with crimson beadwork, the kind of gown that whispered until it screamed. And at its heart, an asymmetrical cutout over my sternum, exposing a glass shard embroidered into the lining, a mirror fragment, symbol of the self broken
remade and exposed. New blood. My blood. I worked in silence for days. Harper and Tara knew not to interrupt me unless the building was on fire or the queen herself demanded tea. I pulled fabric samples, rejected 10 times more than I kept, sourced beaded lace from a hidden atelier in Naples, commissioned a London sculptor to 3D print the final bodice layer using translucent resin. No one else would be wearing anything like this, because no one else had lived what I had, and no one else would dare. The day before the Met, Harper walked into the design room holding 2 garment bags. One was mine, the other I didn't recognize. I frowned. What's that? She gave me a strange look. From Skylar. I stood up. You're joking. Nope. It arrived with a handwritten note. She handed it to me. Heavy stationery, black ink. Valentina. This isn't an olive branch. I'm not that poetic. But I figured it might help you finish what you started. The night of Zenith, I never told you, I didn't just steal your look. I altered it, changed it, cut it apart. I kept the original panels. These are them. Do with them what you want. S. I opened the second garment bag slowly. Inside, the original bodice from my Zenith gown. Frayed, but salvageable. I stared at it for a long time, let the silence sink in. Then I nodded once and added it to the gown. Not out of forgiveness, out of truth. Met Gala Day, New York City. The moment I stepped into the lobby of the Mercer, the air changed. Guests were already arriving across the city in their limos and town cars. Paparazzi camped out along the barricades in Midtown. Makeup artists posted behind-the-scenes shots of lashes and hairpins. And in my suite, there was silence. Harper stood behind me, zipping the back of the gown. Tara took one final photo of the mirror reflection and put her phone away. I turned slowly. The woman in the glass wasn't the girl from Suite 917 anymore. She was someone else entirely. A ghost made visible, a myth in the making. Ready? Harper asked softly. I nodded. But I wasn't just ready. I was inevitable. The Met carpet was a living serpent of silk, tulle, flashbulbs, and curated chaos. Every 15 feet, someone gasped, a train whipped, a heel clicked. When I stepped onto the carpet, the sound didn't rise. It halted. Dead silence. Then, who is that? Is that Valentina Renaud? Oh my God. Click, 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 click. The cameras turned into a sea of shutter fire. My dress flowed behind me like smoke over water. Every inch of it told a story, from the hand-stitched Zenith bodice fragment to the glass mirror at my chest. When I reached the top of the staircase, I turned and bowed. The crowd screamed. Anna Wintour herself shook my hand inside. Leontine Armand sent me a single white rose in a crystal vase to my table. The editor of Runway whispered to a friend that I was the revelation of the night. And across the room, Skylar Naveen raised her champagne glass toward me. I raised mine back. Not enemies, not friends, just women who understood that sometimes a dress wasn't a dress. It was a weapon, or a wound, or a legacy. At 2:03 a.m., after the after-party had ended, after the final compliment, after the Vogue photographer packed up his lens, I stood in front of the mirror in my suite again, took off the gown, hung it, and whispered, "Thank you." To the girl who lost her dress, to the woman who made a dozen more, to me.
The morning after the Met Gala, the city looked different. Not because anything had changed externally. New York still pulsed with yellow cabs, street carts, steam rising from the pavement, but because I had changed. I walked through Soho with sunglasses pushed to the top of my head, coffee in one hand, and a calm I hadn't felt in years.
People turned to stare, not like they used to when I was in a show or had a minor tabloid headline. This was something else. This was recognition. This was respect. Even my posture was different. My shoulders didn't hunch anymore. My chin didn't tilt downward instinctively in elevators or crowded rooms. Somewhere between the moment I walked up the Met steps and the second I unzipped that dress, something foundational had shifted. And I wasn't about to let anyone take it from me. By the time I returned to London, House Renaud had become more than a whisper in fashion circles. It had teeth. Buyers from Bergdorf's had reached out. A Netflix costume director asked if I could design for a limited series based on post-war France. Harper had to build a whole scheduling calendar just to organize the flood of requests. Tara converted our storage unit into a material archive. We even hired a part-time accountant. And then came the next knock. Literally. I was sketching on the second floor of the studio when I heard footsteps on the marble below. A sharp knock. Then another. Harper called up the stairs. "Val, it's for you." I came down and opened the glass door to find a man in a dark suit holding a gold-trimmed envelope. "Miss Renaud?" "Yes." "My employer has requested your presence at the Ruelle estate in Paris. Thursday evening, strictly private. Transportation will be provided." He handed me the envelope, bowed slightly, and walked off before I could even ask what this was. I opened it. The seal was hand-crest, embossed initials. L.A. Leontine Armand. The Ruelle estate was not on any map, at least not one a tourist could find. Hidden deep in the lower valley, it had once belonged to a duchess, then a revolutionary, then a baron who turned it into a private atelier. When I arrived, the gates opened before I could even ring. Inside, a narrow tree-lined drive gave way to a courtyard surrounded by ivy-covered stone. And at its center stood Leontine. She was dressed in a dove-gray coat that seemed tailored from fog itself, standing beside a wrought-iron table set for two. "Valentina, come. Sit." I obeyed, still stunned. We drank white tea from antique porcelain. A soft breeze played with the ends of her scarf. "You walked the Met Gala carpet like a woman possessed. Not by anger, by certainty." I nodded slowly. "It felt that way." "Your use of vulnerability as weapon, that is rare. Not just in fashion, in life." She paused. Then, "I am dying, Valentina." The words fell like silk cut with a blade. My stomach dropped. She went on. "I've known for a year. Pancreatic. It moves quickly, but I have moved faster. There are things I must do before I am finished." I reached for words, but none came. "I built a dynasty," she said softly. "But dynasties rot when they are passed to the wrong hands. My protégé failed me." I didn't ask who. We both knew. "So, I am naming a new one." She looked at me. "I want House Renaud to absorb the legacy of Armand, not as a shadow, as a second son." I blinked. "You want me to inherit Armand?" "No," she said. "I want Armand to become you." My tea cooled. My breath hitched. I couldn't speak. She smiled. "Good. Then it is settled." She slid a small key across the table. "To the vault," she said, "where the blueprints are kept. You will know what to do." And just like that, the empire changed hands. I returned to London a different person. Again. This time, not because I'd been seen, but because I'd been chosen. Skylar called the next day. Her voice was tight. I heard. So did the rest of the industry. You don't think this is a bit fast? You've had, what, one season? One season and a legacy backing me. She fell silent. I let her sit in it, because sometimes silence is louder than any scream. Over the next few weeks, I worked like a woman possessed. I went to the vault. I studied Leontine's earliest work, sketches before she was famous, prototypes made of newspaper and safety pens. I traced the spine of every corset, the dip of every neckline, and then I made my own. 24 gowns. Every one a collision of old and new. Steel boning in neoprene, velvet dyed with crushed hibiscus, embroidered phoenix wings hidden in the lining. We launched the collection in Paris. It wasn't just a runway, it was a resurrection. And by the time the final model stepped onto the marble stage wearing a reimagined version of my stolen Zenith dress, half the crowd was crying. The other half was standing. House Renaud wasn't the future anymore. It was the now.
The applause didn't stop. Long after the final model exited the runway, after the last train swirled and vanished into the wings, the audience remained on their feet. It wasn't just a standing ovation. It was something deeper, reverent, stunned. No one knew what to say. So they didn't. And in that silence, under the lights of a chandelier older than most governments, I stepped forward, wearing black, simple, tailored, with a single crimson thread stitched through the lapel, an homage to the Zenith dress, to the mirror shard, to the girl who had once been forgotten, but not anymore. That night, I didn't attend the after-party. I stayed behind in the empty theater, curled up on the stage with Harper, Tara, and a bottle of French wine we'd hidden in a hollow mannequin. Our staff drifted in one by one, still dazed, and we all sat in a loose circle on the floor. The team was small, just 9 of us, but we'd moved like 100. I looked around at them. These weren't just coworkers. They were architects of an empire. "Is it bad that I don't want to go home?" asked Harper, stretching out on the hardwood. "This is home," I said softly. Tara raised her glass. "To House Renaud." But Harper shook her head. "To the girl who got her dress stolen and made a dynasty out of revenge." We laughed, but my eyes stung. Because it was true. By the following week, the numbers came in. Every single piece in the collection was spoken for. Waiting lists formed for the archival gowns. 3 actresses requested custom commissions for Cannes. A luxury brand offered to acquire House Renaud at a valuation of $87 million. I declined, because House Renaud wasn't for sale. Not to them. I took a week off, first time in a year. I flew to Marseille, rented a tiny stone cottage on the cliffs, and watched the ocean curl in on itself. No press, no stylists, no runways. Just a sketch pad and silence. Until the phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but the number was familiar. Foreign. Intimate. Skylar. I let it go to voicemail. She left one. "Val, I need to talk to you. Not as a rival. As a woman." I stared at the screen. My first instinct was to delete it, but then I remembered what Leontine had said. Dynasties rot when passed to the wrong hands. I didn't want mine to rot. And part of ensuring that meant facing the past completely, even the parts I wanted to forget. So, we met in Lisbon. Neutral ground. No industry vultures, no stage lights. Just a cobblestone cafe overlooking the Atlantic. Skylar arrived late. She wore no makeup. Her hair was tied in a messy knot. She looked like someone who'd stopped running, finally, after years of sprinting. She said, "Thanks for meeting me." I said nothing. Let her start. "I'm stepping back," she said. "From acting?" "From all of it."
She looked out toward the sea. I lost myself in fame, in image, in trying to prove I was still the girl everyone fell in love with, even when I wasn't, even when I hated her. Her voice broke slightly. I did what I did at Zenith because I thought if I wore that dress, I could absorb some of your momentum, that maybe it'd rub off, that maybe I could stay relevant. But I didn't just take a gown. I took your moment. Silence stretched. She looked at me. I'm sorry. Finally. I studied her, really looked, and saw the shadow of the girl I used to compete against, but also someone softer, realer. I forgive you, I said. Not because I had to, because I needed to. She exhaled. We talked for hours after that, not about fashion, about grief, family, burnout, ambition. We left Lisbon as something I never expected. Equals. When I returned to London, everything felt clearer. I made changes, hired a mental health consultant for my staff, scaled our collection release cycle to avoid burnout, signed an agreement to train design students from underserved backgrounds. If I was going to build something enduring, it had to stand on more than fabric and flashbulbs. It had to matter. One night, while sketching at the studio alone, I thought about my old self, the one who sat on a hotel floor, tears dried on her cheek, watching someone else wear her spotlight. And I realized something. That wasn't the worst night of my life. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. Because if my gown had never gone missing, I never would have known what I was capable of creating without it. I smiled and kept.
There was something sacred about returning to the work after forgiveness. My sketches changed. They moved differently. The lines weren't rigid or angry. They were fluid, suggestive, almost tender. They were still corsets, still sharp shoulders and structured drama, but there was softness now, too. Gowns that embraced rather than armored. Fabric that floated, curved, breathed. Harper noticed first. "You're designing like you trust the world again," she said, looking over my shoulder one morning. I hadn't realized it, but she was right. For the first time in years, I wasn't working from spite, or pain, or vengeance. I was working from love. The fall collection was built around that feeling. I called it Glass Garden, because it was all contradictions. Fragile, but rooted. Blooming and breakable. I chose a gallery instead of a runway. Models walked barefoot through mirrored floors. No music, just the sound of breath and movement. It wasn't a show, it was a whisper, and the fashion world leaned in to listen. One morning, a letter arrived. Real paper, stamped, ink that bled slightly from pressure. To Valentina Renaud. From Madame Thérèse Duclerc, Musée de la Mode, Paris. It read, "Your work redefines what modern couture can be. We'd like to extend an invitation for House Renaud to curate the Musée's winter exhibit. A retrospective of your rise from zenith to now." My breath caught. A retrospective? For someone not yet 30? I visited the museum a week later, walked the halls, touched the glass that would one day encase my gowns. Tara took a photo of me standing beneath a carved arch that read, "Les voix qui cousent le temps," the voices that stitched time. I'd never felt more seen. The exhibit opened in December. Snow fell lightly the day before. The city felt like something out of a dream, white and quiet and full of reverence. Guests entered through a hallway of mirrors. Each mirror showed a dress, projected holograms of every gown I'd ever designed. They shimmered and vanished as you walked. Then came the physical pieces. The Zenith dress fragment, the Met Gala gown, the Phoenix silk, the mirror spine bodice, and finally, in the center of it all, the ghost dress. A gown made entirely of translucent fabric, suspended by invisible thread. It had no seams, no hooks, no zippers. It was just form, a reminder of the dress that never arrived, the one that was stolen, the one that set everything in motion. On opening night, I stood quietly at the back of the exhibit. People moved like water around me. Some whispered, some cried. A young girl in a pink beret stared at the ghost dress for a long time. Then she turned to her mother and asked, "Did she make this from nothing?" The mother nodded. From herself. I smiled, because she was right. That winter, I received the Global Visionary Designer Award in New York. The following spring, I opened the Venice Triennale with an installation about textile memory and generational grief. And in the summer, the unexpected happened. A letter arrived from Hollywood. It was from my old director on Riverlight, the show that started everything. He wrote, "We're adapting the final arc, one last season, set years after the original timeline. We want you back, not just as our lead actress, as our costume designer, as our executive producer." I stared at the letter for hours. It wasn't nostalgia, it was a full circle moment. The girl who'd nearly missed her first big red carpet was being asked to lead the final chapter of the story that first gave her a name. I said yes. Filming began in July. The set felt like coming home, but different, better. I wasn't just reading lines, I was dressing the world, designing every frame, crafting who these characters had become. The new Valentina Renaud wasn't just on screen. She was behind every thread. Skylar joined the season as well, not as a star, but as a guest, as a character written with grace and fallibility. She called me after her first day on set. "You've built something impossible," she said. I smiled. I built what I needed to survive and then made it beautiful. She didn't respond right away. Then, "Thank you for letting me be part of it." When the final scene wrapped, I stood alone on set watching the lights go down. The costume racks were empty. The script pages curled slightly from the summer heat. The stage was quiet. But I wasn't sad, because I knew I hadn't peaked. This wasn't the end. It was a pause, a deep breath before the next rise. And I was ready. After the final wrap of Riverlight, I took the longest breath I had in years. And then I exhaled it into something entirely new. I didn't want to ride on past glories. The industry was full of people doing exactly that, releasing fragrance lines based on their first hit, hosting panel interviews, recounting their breakout stories like mythology. I didn't want to be immortalized in a rerun. I wanted to be unfolding. So, I made a list. Not of goals, of gaps. All the spaces I hadn't stepped into yet. And at the top of that list, in bold black ink, mentorship. Not of celebrities, not of influencers, but of raw, hungry, undiscovered talent. Because when I thought back, really thought back, the girl in Suite 917 didn't need praise. She didn't need an agent or a retweet. She needed someone to see her before the world did. I was going to be that person now. I launched the Renaud Fellowship quietly. No press release, just a page on our website and an application form buried beneath our main menu. We received over 3,000 entries in the first 48 hours. Harper narrowed it to 300, Tara cut it to 30, I picked 3. 3 young women, all from wildly different backgrounds, all with something to say, all furious and hopeful and breathtaking. Their names were Kala, Imani, and Brielle, and they were about to inherit the same fire that once lived in me. I remember our first morning together in the London studio. The 3 of them sat around the long table, sketch pads open, nervous hands fidgeting with pencils and thread. Kala spoke first. "Are we supposed to just start?" I smiled. "No, first you watch."
I walked to the dress form in the corner, draped a swatch of muslin over its shoulder, began cutting. No instructions, no explanation, just the movement. Their eyes widened. When I finished the first fold, I turned. That's how you start. You don't wait for permission. You cut, even if it bleeds. Weeks passed. Kala designed a dress made entirely from pressed lavender petals stitched into silk. Imani reconstructed a wedding gown from recycled paper and lace. Brielle built a corset modeled after her mother's childhood blueprint sketches. The woman had been an architect. Watching them create was like seeing the universe fold in on itself, full circle, wondrous. And then came the day I gave them the ultimate challenge. Design my next red carpet look, I said. They stared at me. No brief? Imani asked. None, I said. Except this. Whoever I choose will walk with me, as my date. Their faces lit up like stars. 2 weeks later, they presented. Kala's was fire, a crimson silk with layers of hand-sewn barbs beneath the hem meant to catch the light like armor. Imani's was sorrow, deep blue, beaded tears that cascaded like waterfalls when the model moved. Brielle's was truth. A sheer organza sheath, hand-painted with quotes I'd said over the years, sourced from interviews, articles, even a diary entry I didn't know had leaked. She ended it with, "Sometimes a dress is a declaration. Sometimes it's a reckoning." That was my line. I chose Brielle. We walked the Florence Film Festival carpet together. 2 women, one in a gown made of memories, the other in a legacy reborn. The press lost their minds, but I didn't care about them. I cared about the look in Brielle's eyes, like she finally saw herself, like she finally belonged. Backstage after the carpet, Brielle pulled me aside. "I don't think I want to be you," she said. I nodded. "Good. You're gonna be better." She cried. I held her. And in that moment, I knew. The next era of House Renault wasn't about me anymore. It was about what came after. That fall, I stepped back. Not from creating, not from storytelling, but from centering. I put Kala in charge of our spring campaign, gave Imani full control of the textile development lab, offered Brielle a co-creative director position. The industry called it radical. I called it obvious, because power hoarded is pointless, but power shared, that's where movements begin. At the end of the year, we launched the Renault Collective, an incubator for marginalized designers across 5 countries. We offered studio space, stipends, mental health services, and, most importantly, freedom. And slowly, quietly, surely, we became the most feared, revered, and real design house in the world. Not because of me, but because of what I let grow after me.
The Renaud Collective wasn't just a program, it was a manifesto, and it grew faster than we'd ever imagined. In the first year alone, we opened satellite studios in Johannesburg, Sao Paulo, Mumbai, and Seoul, each with their own lead, each with a different voice. We weren't trying to carbon copy the London blueprint. We were letting each location sing its own song. And still, every thread stitched across the globe held one common signature: intention. We didn't make clothes. We made stories. I traveled constantly. One week, I was in Mumbai, guiding a designer named Harleen as she embroidered sacred Punjabi motifs into streetwear silhouettes. The next, I was in Sao Paulo,
watching an indigenous Amazonian textile artist spin plant fiber into something that looked like it came from another galaxy. I wasn't leading from the front anymore. I was witnessing, amplifying, protecting. And that, I realized, was a different kind of power. But growth always brings new eyes, and not all of them are kind. In our third year, a rival fashion conglomerate, Everhart Group, offered to acquire us. 9 figures, control of global distribution, access to exclusive suppliers. You'll be unstoppable, their CEO told me over lunch at the Connaught. I smiled. You mean, you will. He laughed nervously. We're just giving you scale. No, I replied. You're asking me to surrender. He blinked. I stood, and I never called him again. 2 weeks later, we got hit. Hard. Supply delays, fabric batches held in customs without explanation. An anonymous insider report leaked to fashion tabloids claiming the Renaud Collective underpaid workers. A lie so egregious, I nearly threw my phone across the room. We traced it all back to Everhart, a smear campaign. They couldn't buy us, so they tried to bleed us. But they didn't know who they were dealing with, because you don't become me without knowing how to fight in silence. We changed shipping routes, sourced emergency materials locally, called in every journalist who had ever doubted us and gave them studio access. Tara launched a behind-the-scenes docuseries that went viral in 48 hours. Imani led a TikTok campaign exposing unethical practices in fast fashion. Kala created a pop-up in Camden Town made entirely from discarded Everhart gowns, restructured to tell stories of garment workers. Brielle wrote an open letter. We are not your trend. We are not your interns. We are not your buyout option. We are the future you tried to bury under velvet, and we are rising. Within 3 weeks, Everhart's stock dropped 19%. Within 4, their CEO resigned. And within 5, we became the cover of Business of Fashion. Headline: The empire they couldn't cancel. How House Renaud redefined power. I wish I could say it felt like victory, but it didn't. It felt like survival. And survival, no matter how elegant, still leaves bruises. So I did what I always do when I need clarity. I designed. I went quiet, vanished from the public for 2 months, locked myself in a villa in Corsica with just fabric, scissors, and silence. And what emerged was the most intimate work I'd ever made. A collection titled The Things I Couldn't Say. Each piece was a confession. A gown made from shredded rejection letters. A suit hand-stitched with every nickname I'd been called. Bitch, fake, too much, too young, transformed into an armor of silver thread. A cape sewn with buttons taken from the clothes I wore the year my father left. And at the center of it all, a bodice reconstructed from the original Zenith hemline, stitched this time with my full name, in gold. We debuted the collection in silence. No press, no pre-coverage, just an unlisted YouTube livestream. We called it, If You're Meant to See This, You Will. It hit 2 million views in 36 hours. And suddenly, all of fashion was playing catch-up again. After that, the energy shifted. People stopped treating me like a designer who got lucky. They started treating me like an institution, which is ironic because right around then, I got a call from Oxford University. They wanted to create a visiting chair, the Renaud Fellowship in Design and Cultural Narrative, not just fashion, but impact. I said yes, not because I needed more titles, but because I wanted to sit across from the next me.
and tell her, I see you. You're not too much. You're right on time. That fall, I gave my first lecture in a dark auditorium filled with students. I told them the truth, that I built my empire with the broken pieces of a dress I never wore, that silence is sometimes the most powerful fabric, that you can forgive without folding, that you can rise without rushing, and that fashion is not about clothes. It's about courage.
The standing ovation at Oxford wasn't loud. It was quiet, reverent. Dozens of students remained seated after the final slide faded to black, as if afraid to break the spell. Their eyes weren't full of adoration, but something better, understanding. The kind of recognition that transcended applause. I stood there, still and steady, letting the silence swell, letting it be the punctuation it deserved. Because this wasn't a lecture, it was a passing of the torch. After the event, I stayed in the hallway, speaking one-on-one with each student who waited. They asked questions I wish I had the courage to ask when I was their age. How do you stay soft in a brutal industry? How do you decide when a risk is worth it? What do you do when you outgrow your origin story? That one nearly unstitched me. Because the truth was, I had outgrown it. The girl who lost her dress had become a woman who clothed the world. But I didn't know who I was without that beginning. And I was about to find out. It started with an email. From a name I hadn't seen in over a decade. Dax Montclair. The same Dax who once sent a winking text while my career crumbled around a missing dress. The same Dax who never truly apologized for stepping over my moment to protect his own. His message was brief. Subject: a proposal. Val, I'm writing a limited series based on fashion and power. It's fictional, but inspired by real threats. You're the only one I trust to design the visuals. It's time the industry saw what your world really looks like. On your terms. Will you consider it? Dash. D. I stared at the screen. Felt something tighten in my stomach. Not anger. Not nostalgia. Recognition. He was offering me a mirror, and I wasn't afraid to look. We met in Paris, neutral ground, city of memory and reinvention. He waited for me at Café de Flore, suit too tailored, smile too careful, but I wasn't the same girl he remembered. Val, he said, standing, you look real. I finished. He nodded. We talked. Not about the past, about the show. The premise was sharp. A young designer builds a brand out of betrayal. The lines between muse and manipulator blur. It was art imitating life, with blood in its seams. I want to get it right, he said, and I can't without you. Then let's get to work, I replied. The series became Cutline. We shot in Berlin, London, and Tokyo. I oversaw costumes, set design, and thematic continuity. I trained the lead actress in the posture, language, and silence of real fashion power. And when the trailer dropped, the world went still. The visuals alone sent shockwaves. Architectural gowns in abandoned cathedrals, models standing waist-deep in mirrored water, a finale look made of shattered glass and resilience. Everyone knew who was behind it, but no one said my name out loud, because I didn't need them to. On premiere night, Dax and I stood beside each other on the carpet. Photographers shouted, reporters speculated, but all I could think about was the full circle of it. The man who once sat beside me in rehearsals while my dress disappeared, now standing beside the woman who built an empire without it. After the premiere, we walked through a garden alone. He turned to me. Did you ever imagine this? I said, only every day.
Then he asked the question I never thought I'd hear from him. Did I ruin you? I shook my head. You revealed me. When Cutline won the International Series of the Year, I skipped the ceremony. I was in Lagos, working with a young designer named Chioma, who was using laser etching to embed ancestral symbols into modern silhouettes. Because that's where the real future was. Not in red carpets, but in workshops. Not in trophies, but in torch passing. At the end of the year, House Renaud announced our boldest initiative yet, a fully self-sustained floating design residency, a vessel that would travel the world's coasts, docking in underserved communities, offering mentorship, equipment, and exposure. We called it the Stitch Line. A moving atelier, a living curriculum, a legacy in motion. We launched in Marseille. Skylar came. So did every member of the collective. Brielle gave the keynote. Tara sobbed through the ribbon cutting. Harper handed me a gift, the original sketch I made the night of Zenith. Framed, preserved, and signed in her handwriting.
Breath. The syllable vibrates in my mind like the downbeat of a symphony about to collapse into discord. 8 hours on a countdown. Anonymous threat. Live feed of Chicago River lock controls, and Kofi detained by police under suspicion we now know was manufactured. Trust in shreds. Tension strung taut enough to garrote. I hunch over the hotel balcony rail, icy wind flaying cheeks red as sirens echoed distantly along Lakeshore Drive. Below, Lake Michigan's vast slate swells under pinprick stars, oblivious to human ultimata. The phone's clock ticks 07:58:31. Every second drains resolve or fuels it. I cannot tell. Behind me, the suite door bursts open. Mateo lunges out, still in sweatpants, hair a bird's nest of worry. They're releasing Kofi for now, he pants. Insufficient evidence, but he has to stay local. He eyes the freeze of my posture, notices phone clenched like detonator. What's happened? I replay threat for him, voice a low monotone to keep panic caged. His expression hardens. They want chaos. We can't dance to that tune. I won't, I whisper, but inside, dread slithers. If I misstep, floodgates open, downtown Chicago could submerge. The stage of a city as casualty. Rapid Response Council, 0345 local. Cassandra Tycross convenes emergency meeting in conference room overlooking Dark River. Security sweeps hall. A team of ex-military professionals stands guard. Present, Cassandra, her CTO, Dr. Hannah Reyes, Lysander, via headset from London, time-zoned but alert, Iris, myself. Kofi joins by video link from Precinct Lounge, cheeks still tear-stained yet resolute. We scrub through the extorted video. Low-light capture of lock control panel, digital timer superimposed. Dr. Reyes notes metadata suggests deep fake layering. Timer could be green-screened, but risk cannot be ignored. The locks integrate century-old hydraulics with new smart modules. Remote hack is plausible if someone breached on-site system. Chicago PD and Homeland Security looped in, but they treat as potential terrorism, requiring red tape hours we don't have. I push hair off face. They framed Kofi. They want us fractured, chasing ghosts while they orchestrate bigger show. Cassandra taps pen against glass table. Anonymous caller used phrase lantern breaks and city drowns. Lantern, common motif in your shows. Undertows lantern, symbol of light and defiance. They twist our art into threat narratives. Whoever it is, they watch us intimately. Lysander could be Miriam's remaining faction or Tristan's warning about foundations. I nod, but voice deeper hunch. It feels personal, more than money or real estate. They orchestrate tides, sabotage performances, frame friends. It's about control through fear. Assembling the core. We rouse the dancers from exhausted sleep. By 04:15 local, conference room packed. Lena, Liv, Marisol, Renee, Bruce Paling, Felix, and newly released Kofi escorted by apologetic officer. Though shell-shocked, he stands tall. On-wall screen, Dr. Reyes displays internal map, Chicago River's system of 18 movable bridges and 2 lock controls at Lake Michigan. She pinpoints feed's vantage. Camera perched high inside Lock 1 operations tower, restricted area. If feed genuine, intruder inside tower or hijacked internal CCTV. Police promise sweep by dawn, but I know bureaucratic pace. We need proactive infiltration. I propose split teams, technical infiltration, public communication, and Kofi's exoneration campaign. Cassandra consents, lending access badges to Tycross drone fleet for aerial recon. Marisol volunteers comes, prepping a livestream fundraiser disguised as open rehearsal to hold audience attention. If we must publicly respond, we shape narrative. Kofi insists on infiltration role to prove loyalty. I hesitate, fragile trust, but he locks eyes. They used my image as weapon. I'll reclaim it. His conviction steers me. Countdown 06:32:10. We mobilize. Dr. Reyes leads tech strike. Myself, Kofi, Felix, hardware tinkerer, 2 Tycross security. Intent, access tower before sunrise shift, verify threat, neutralize if real. Mateo remains base with Iris, coordinating legal and communications. Renee organizes dancers for live stream distraction at Millennium Park by sunrise, keeping public safe distance from riverfront, but eyes on us if calamity avoided. I strap on black utility leggings, no longer costume, but armor. Taped ankle, whisper protest. I lace support tighter. In mirror, I see girl who once only wanted spotlight. Now, spotlight glares from crisis stage. Approach path. Unmarked SUV glides silent through city's pre-dawn hush. Skyscraper windows glint faint amber. At 05:14, we park 2 blocks from Lock Tower, adjacent to shuttered coffee roastery. Drone footage shows no guard presence, motion sensors offline. Curiously convenient. Security duo Briggs and Liao flank entrance. Locked. Felix bypasses keypad with homemade Raspberry Pi sled in 30 seconds. Practiced mischief once used for theater prop rooms, now critical skill. Inside, corridor reeks of mildew and machine oil. Overhead fluorescents flicker, though building appears deserted. We split. Liao and Briggs sweep lower maintenance. Kofi and I ascend narrow spiral to operations deck. Felix establishes uplink to Dr. Reyes's laptop via encrypted radio. At the top landing, a metal door ajar. I gesture silence. We slip in. Control room lit only by alarms panel glow. Unsettling crimson. Timer screen present on master monitor matching extortion feed. 03:46:09 remaining. Real lock override commands queued in software UI. 1 keystroke from catastrophic release. But room empty. Kofi scans corners. Could be remote. I approach console. Dr. Reyes's voice crackles in my earpiece. See the port at the rear. Patch dongle. Will attempt kill command. I comply. Felix's code streams across monitor, initiating command injection. Progress bar creeps. Suddenly, door slams shut. We spin. A tall silhouette blocks exit. Black balaclava, night vision goggles glinting green. He raises silenced pistol. Adrenaline detonates. I shove Kofi aside as muffled pop thuds. Bullet tears into panel, sparks shower. Control screen flicks static. Timer persists in upper corner. I grab metal clipboard off desk, fling toward intruder. It clangs off shoulder. He advances, firing again. Round smacks steel doorframe. Kofi seizes file extinguisher, discharges cloud into his face. Hissing whiteout by seconds. Kofi tackles him. Both crash into a bank of fuses. Gun skitters away. I leap onto Masked Man's back, locking chokehold learned from stage combat classes. He bucks. Goggles fall, revealing scarred cheek. I tighten grip. Kofi binds wrists with cable ties scavenged from the panel. Liao bursts in, handgun drawn. Stands down once threat subdued. Room reeks of CO2 mist and burnt insulation.
unmasking the saboteur. We flip intruder onto back, yank balaclava off. I gasp. Not Westhall board, not Miriam. It's Ellis Crow, the cameraman who once rescued his equipment during the pier chaos, who filmed our first a cappella save. His eyes cold now. Why? I demand, breath ragged. He smirks. Documentary gold, nothing sells like Downfall. Felix enters via comlink. Abort attempt failed, code corrupted. Timer continues 032855. Ellis laughs. You think I'd store trigger here? Redundant nodes, sweetheart. We drag him to chair, cable tie ankles. Liao radios Chicago PD for pickup. Dr. Reyes, we must locate remote trigger servers. I need his credentials. I glare at Ellis. Give us codes, or you'll never premiere your masterpiece. Ellis shrugs. Art demands sacrifice. Flood shot from drones? Chef's kiss. Kofi's voice trembles with fury. You fake-framed me, risked millions. Ellis's retort cut short by Briggs. Sensors detect 2 additional intruders at maintenance level. More contractors? Shots echo below. Liao departs to assist. I lean closer to Ellis. Your documentary dies with you in prison, but Redeem Now, you co-produced Tideline Film. A bluff, but a glimmer flickers in his eyes. Ego bait.
The girl from Tangier never left my thoughts. It wasn't just her smile, or the dress stitched together with borrowed threads and belief. It was the echo, the way her sketch felt familiar, not in style, but in spirit. Like a quiet signal sent from the future, back to the past. And for weeks afterward, I found myself sketching again. Not collections, not concepts, but her. Her hands, her silhouette, her hunger. She reminded me of who I was when I had nothing to lose and everything to prove. She reminded me why I began. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I went back to where it all started. Not Suite 917. Earlier. Far earlier. My hometown in the French Pyrenees hadn't changed much. The streets still smelled of wood smoke and wet stone. The bakeries still sold the same jam tartlets. My old school sat with its shutters half closed, as if still recovering from its last generation of noise. I walked those streets like a ghost, not unnoticed, but unannounced. At the edge of town, I found the shed, a small, rusted structure where I'd once hidden scraps of fabric, stolen from thrift stores and stitched by flashlight. I unlocked the warped door. Inside, dust, silence, and memory. But in the far corner, a box. And inside that box, the first dress I ever made. Uneven hem, mismatched buttons, shoulder seams like puckered regret. But it was mine, and it had survived. I brought it back to my flat in France, hung it in my studio, and for the first time in decades, I re-stitched it. Not to fix it, but to honor it. I added a ribbon inside the collar, one word, embroidered in gold, begin. That fall, I received an invitation. It was handwritten, no return address. Simply, we're hosting the next generation. Will you come sit beside them? The location, a remote artist residency in Iceland. I'd never been, but I said yes, not to teach, to listen. The residency was unlike anything I'd seen. Not studios, but sanctuaries. One in a greenhouse, one in a lighthouse, one built inside a converted whale-watching station. No press, no sponsors, just 12 artists, 1 month, and absolute freedom. I stayed in the smallest cabin. No mirrors, only windows. The youngest fellow, an 18-year-old from Morocco, recognized me on day 2. She didn't ask for a selfie. She asked me to critique her work. I did. Harshly. Lovingly. She didn't cry. She revised.
And by the end of the month, she'd made something that nearly unstitched my soul. A dress made from her grandmother's house curtains, dyed with black tea, and stitched with her mother's handwriting. It didn't just fit, it spoke. After the residency, I received a letter from the Icelandic Council. They wanted to name the program permanently after me. I declined, not because I wasn't honored, but because I didn't want the future shaped by my name, only my permission. Instead, I gave them the rights to my archive. Sketches, prototypes, voice memos, every private note I'd once scribbled about fabric, emotion, and lineage. Let them see the scaffolding behind the silhouette. Let them build. Back in France, I sat on my terrace one morning, sipping strong coffee, watching the sun drip over the hills, and I realized something. There were no next steps. No what now, no urge to scale or sprint. Only stillness. Only self. Only peace. And peace, for someone like me, was the final couture, the one no one sees, but feels. I wrote letters. One to Harper, one to Tara, to every designer who had passed through the Renaud Collective. I told them, I am not vanishing. I am becoming background. I am not exiting. I am expanding into you. I mailed them all on the same day. It felt like releasing doves, or scissors. On my birthday that year, I received a small package. No note. Just a square of cloth, faded, beautiful. It was from the girl in Tangier, her sketch embroidered into fabric. Along the edge, she made space. I made thread. I held it to my chest, closed my eyes, and whispered, yes.
The letter came on a morning that smelled like rain. No return address. Only a seal, the faint outline of a phoenix. Inside, handwritten ink, slightly smudged, Valentina. We're curating a global exhibit on design as defiance. We'd like you to close the installation with one final piece, not a retrospective, not a memoir, a moment, pure and singular. Make anything, or nothing, but if you say yes, we'll clear the final wall for you. Forever. T. No signature, just that lone initial. But I knew who it was. Tara. Still working in the shadows, still building sanctuaries, still believing that stories were best when whispered through fabric. I didn't reply, not right away. I went to the studio, pulled down every unused bolt of fabric, stacked sketchbooks like sacred texts. I wasn't looking for inspiration. I was listening. And 2 weeks later, the answer came to me in a dream. A child walking into a gallery. No labels, no instructions, just a dress, hanging, and stitched inside the hem, you begin. Not you will, not you should, but you begin. Like a nudge, like a birthright. So that's what I made. A dress that wasn't mine, a dress that belonged to whoever stood before it. It had no size, no form, just layers. Some rough, some regal. Scraps from every era I'd lived through. Zenith lace, Met Gala silk, Corsica muslin, Brielle's embroidery, Schuyler's belt, Kioma's dye, all of it coexisting. And at its heart, a single pocket. Inside, a mirror. Not large, just enough to catch your eyes and remember that the real design
was always the person wearing it. The gallery installed it in Lisbon. No announcement, no spotlights, just a white wall, a suspended silhouette, a bench nearby, and a brass plaque. The dress that wasn't there. Donated by Anonymous. I visited a month later, sat on the bench for an hour. No one noticed me. I watched strangers walk up to the dress. Some tilted their heads. Some smiled. One young girl cried. None of them read the plaque. They didn't have to, because what I'd made wasn't a final piece. It was an invitation to start, to thread, to build. That night, back at my flat, I opened the last box, the one I'd sealed on my last day in London. Inside, my first press clipping, a cracked needle, a roll of thread I'd carried through 10 cities, and a note from Harper, aged with time. Whatever happens, don't let them convince you you're lucky. You're not. You're chosen. I folded it, set it in the center of my desk, and let the room go still. Not with sadness, but with recognition. This wasn't the end. It was the final hem. Tied. Neat. Unbreakable. Somewhere right now, another girl is holding thread between her fingers. Somewhere she's crying over a machine that won't listen. Somewhere she's sketching a gown no one will see. Yet. But she will. She'll make it. She'll wear it. She'll give it away. And the cycle will go on, not because of me, but because of what I left behind. Not gowns, not awards, but permission to begin. And if you're reading this, maybe it's your turn now to thread the needle, to cut, to stitch, to rise.